The torn copy of Hamlet trembled in Jeremiah's weathered hands as 17-year-old Madison Whitmore snatched his phone from the pristine marble fountain, her manicured finger already hitting post on TikTok. "Look, everyone, it's our very own ghetto Shakespeare!" she shrieked, her voice carrying across the manicured lawns of Buckhead's most exclusive neighborhood like a knife through silk. The notification sound chimed relentlessly as the video uploaded. A black man in dirt-stained overalls, sitting on an overturned bucket beside a tool shed, reciting Hamlet's soliloquy with the kind of passion that made the words bleed truth. Within minutes, the comments flooded in like a digital lynch mob, laughing emojis, racial slurs, and mockery that cut deeper than any garden shears. Jeremiah Washington had been tending these gardens for 3 years, his calloused hands coaxing life from Georgia clay while his mind wandered through the corridors of Elsinore Castle. Every morning at dawn, he arrived at the Whitmore estate, a sprawling Georgian mansion that commanded 6 acres of perfectly sculpted landscape. The family barely acknowledged his existence, treating him like another piece of garden equipment, useful, necessary, but hardly human. But Shakespeare was his sanctuary. During his lunch breaks, while the Whitmores entertained their country club friends with champagne brunches on the terrace, Jeremiah would retreat to his shed. There, surrounded by bags of fertilizer and coiled hoses, he'd open his battered copy of the complete works, a treasure rescued from a library's discard pile, and lose himself in iambic pentameter. The words flowed through him like water through parched earth, filling spaces in his soul that 60-hour work weeks couldn't touch. "To be or not to be," he'd whisper, his voice carrying the weight of a man who understood existential struggle intimately. Growing up in East Atlanta, the son of a single mother who cleaned office buildings until her fingers bled, Jeremiah had learned early that dreams were luxuries poor black boys couldn't afford. High school had ended abruptly when his mother's cancer diagnosis forced him into the workforce. College became a fantasy, Shakespeare his secret rebellion against a world that expected nothing from him but manual labor. Madison's video exploded overnight. Ghetto Shakespeare trending across social media platforms, spawning reaction videos and comedy sketches. The original post garnered 2 million views in 48 hours, most comments dripping with ridicule. "Stick to lawn mowing," one user typed. "Somebody tell this man McDonald's is hiring," wrote another. The cruelest ones questioned his intelligence, his right to even touch such elevated literature. The harassment followed him home. His apartment complex's teenagers recognized him from the video, shouting quotes in exaggerated Shakespearean voices whenever he passed. "Hark, the gardener doth speaketh," they'd laugh, throwing empty bottles at his feet. His supervisor at the landscaping company, a perpetually sunburned man named Dale, pulled him aside with uncomfortable concern. "Look, Jeremiah, maybe keep the reading to yourself from now on," Dale muttered, avoiding eye contact. "Some clients are concerned about professionalism." But Jeremiah couldn't stop. Shakespeare had become his lifeline, the one thing that reminded him he was more than society's expectations. Each evening, after his body ached from 8 hours of physical labor, he'd sit in his small kitchen, the collected works spread before him like sacred texts. He'd read Othello and see his own struggle reflected in the Moor's isolation. In King Lear's rage against ingratitude, he heard his own voice crying against injustice. The video's popularity brought unwanted attention to the Whitmore estate. Paparazzi lurked outside their gates, hoping to catch another glimpse of the Shakespeare gardener. Local news stations requested interviews. The family's pristine reputation, built on old money and charity galas, suddenly carried an uncomfortable asterisk: the viral mockery of their employee. Patricia Whitmore, Madison's mother, was furious. Not at her daughter's cruelty, but at Jeremiah's unwanted notoriety. "This is exactly why we need more appropriate help," she hissed during a tense family dinner, her fork clinking against fine china with sharp precision. "People who understand their place." Madison basked in her viral fame, accumulating followers and brand sponsorship offers. She filmed follow-up videos, each more elaborate than the last, turning Jeremiah's literary passion into content for her personal brand. The shed became her backdrop, Shakespeare's words her punchline. But viral fame is fickle, and interest began waning after the first week. The internet's attention span moved on to newer entertainment, leaving behind the digital debris of casual cruelty. Jeremiah thought the nightmare was over until Wednesday morning brought an unexpected convoy. 3 black SUVs with diplomatic plates rolled through the Whitmore's iron gates like a scene from a political thriller. From the middle vehicle emerged 2 men in impeccable dark suits, their movements precise and purposeful. They surveyed the grounds with professional eyes before opening the rear door of a gleaming Rolls-Royce. Lady Catherine Pemberton stepped onto the circular driveway with the quiet authority of someone born to command attention without demanding it. Her silver hair was pulled into an elegant chignon, her navy blue suit perfectly tailored, and pinned to her lapel was a small but unmistakable royal insignia. The Prince of Wales, feathers in gold and enamel. The Whitmores scrambled from their house like startled birds, Patricia smoothing her designer dress while her husband, Robert, hastily adjusted his tie. They'd received no advance notice of this visit, and the confusion was written across their faces in expensive concealer and nervous sweat. "Lady Pemberton," Robert stammered, extending his hand, "to what do we owe this unexpected honor?" She smiled politely but didn't answer immediately. Instead, her gaze swept across the immaculate gardens, taking in the geometric precision of the hedge maze, the riot of color in the rose beds, the way morning light caught the dewdrops on perfectly trimmed grass. "I'm here about your gardener," she said simply, her crisp British accent turning the words into something that sounded simultaneously elegant and ominous. The family exchanged glances. Patricia's face paled beneath her makeup. Madison, who had emerged from the house still in her silk pajamas, suddenly looked far younger than her 17 years. "I'm afraid there's been some misunderstanding," Robert began, but Lady Pemberton raised a gentle hand. "No misunderstanding. I've come specifically to meet Mr. Washington. Is he here?" The question hung in the air like morning mist. Jeremiah, who had been pruning the rose bushes near the guest house, heard his name carried on the breeze and looked up to see the gathering on the main terrace. For a moment, he considered disappearing into the gardens, avoiding whatever confrontation this mysterious woman might bring. But something in her posture, the way she stood apart from the Whitmore's nervous energy, made him set down his shears and walk toward the house. As he approached, Lady Pemberton's eyes found his. Her expression was unreadable, professional, but there was something beneath the surface, a spark of recognition, perhaps, or anticipation. "Mr. Washington," she said as he reached the terrace, still in his work clothes, dirt under his fingernails, sweat beading on his forehead from the Georgia humidity. "I'm Lady Catherine Pemberton. I believe we have much to discuss." The Whitmores looked like they were watching a tennis match, their heads swiveling between the aristocrat and their gardener. Madison had her phone out, instinctively reaching for content, but something in Lady Pemberton's gaze made her lower it quickly. "Ma'am," Jeremiah said simply, unsure of proper protocol. He'd never met royalty, wasn't even certain this woman was who she claimed to be. "I understand you're fond of Shakespeare," Lady Pemberton continued, and there was warmth in her voice now, genuine interest that caught Jeremiah off guard. He nodded cautiously. "Yes, ma'am, in my spare time. Would you mind sharing a passage? I'm particularly fond of Hamlet myself." The request stunned everyone into silence. Patricia Whitmore's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Robert's face flushed red with embarrassment. Madison looked between her parents and the strange woman, trying to understand the power dynamics at play. But Jeremiah felt something shift inside him. This woman, whatever her true identity, was asking him to do the one thing that brought him joy, treating his passion with respect instead of ridicule. He stood straighter, his voice finding the confidence that years of secret recitation had built. "To be or not to be, that is the question," he began, and immediately the words transformed him. His voice grew stronger, more assured, carrying across the manicured lawn with authority that made the morning birds pause their singing. "Whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles, and by opposing, end them." Lady Pemberton's face lit up with genuine delight. When Jeremiah finished the soliloquy, she began to applaud, her hands coming together in crisp, appreciative claps that echoed off the mansion's columns. "Extraordinary," she said, and the word carried weight, as if spoken by someone who knew excellence when she heard it. "Your interpretation captures both the philosophical weight and emotional urgency of Hamlet's crisis. Where did you study?" The question hung heavy in the morning air. Jeremiah felt the Whitmore's eyes on him, felt the familiar shame of admitting his lack of formal education. But Lady Pemberton's expression held no judgment, only curiosity. I didn't, ma'am. Taught myself mostly. From books. Her eyebrows rose slightly. Self-taught? That makes your understanding even more remarkable. She turned to address the Whitmores, who had been silent spectators to this strange performance. You must be very proud to have such a talented individual working on your estate. The comment landed like a diplomatic grenade. Patricia's smile looked painted on, Robert's discomfort was palpable, and Madison suddenly found great interest in her designer slippers. Now then, Lady Pemberton continued, turning back to Jeremiah, I should explain why I'm here. I chair the Pemberton Foundation, which promotes literary arts and education. We've been following your viral fame, shall we say. Jeremiah's stomach dropped. He'd assumed the worst was behind him, that the internet's cruel attention had moved on to fresher targets. The thought of renewed scrutiny, especially from someone with obvious influence, filled him with dread. But Lady Pemberton's next words shattered his assumptions completely. We'd like to offer you a scholarship to study at the Royal Academy of Dramatic Arts in London. Full tuition, living expenses, and a stipend. Our foundation believes exceptional talent deserves exceptional opportunities, regardless of traditional educational background. The world seemed to tilt sideways. Jeremiah heard the words but couldn't process their meaning. Scholarship, London, Royal Academy. Each term felt foreign, impossible, like she was speaking a language he'd never learned. I don't understand, he said quietly. The Royal Academy of Dramatic Arts is one of the world's most prestigious acting schools, Lady Pemberton explained patiently. Alumni include Anthony Hopkins, Kenneth Branagh, Tom Hiddleston. Our foundation occasionally sponsors exceptional candidates who might not otherwise have access to such training. Behind her, the Whitmores stood frozen in tableau, their faces cycling through disbelief, embarrassment, and dawning recognition of their own complicity in nearly destroying something precious. But why me? Jeremiah asked, still unable to grasp the magnitude of what was being offered. Lady Pemberton smiled, and for the first time, it reached her eyes completely. Because talent is universal, Mr. Washington, but opportunity is not. Your viral video wasn't just entertainment for those who mocked you, it was revelation for those of us who recognize genius when we see it. The way you inhabit Shakespeare's language, make it breathe and live, that's not something that can be taught. It's gift, and gifts like yours deserve cultivation, not ridicule. She reached into her purse and withdrew an elegant envelope sealed with the foundation's embossed crest. The formal offer is here, along with instructions for enrollment. Classes begin in September. You'd need to relocate to London, of course. Jeremiah took the envelope with trembling hands. The paper felt substantial, expensive, real, in a way that made the offer suddenly concrete. London, the Royal Academy, a life he'd never dared imagine, suddenly within reach. There's one more thing, Lady Pemberton added, her voice taking on a slightly different tone. Our foundation is also launching a new program to identify and nurture hidden talent in underserved communities. We'll need someone to help develop the curriculum, someone who understands both the power of literature and the barriers that prevent access to it. If your studies go well, there might be opportunities for you to shape how we identify the next generation of overlooked artists. The implications hit him like a physical force, not just an opportunity to transform his own life, but to help others escape the same limitations that had nearly trapped him forever. I don't know what to say, he whispered. Say yes, Lady Pemberton replied simply. Say yes to possibility. As if breaking from a spell, Patricia Whitmore suddenly stepped forward, her voice bright with forced enthusiasm. This is wonderful news. We're so proud of Jeremiah. He's been absolutely wonderful here. Such dedication, such... She faltered, clearly struggling to find words that wouldn't reveal her previous indifference. Lady Pemberton regarded her with cool assessment. I'm sure you've been very supportive of his literary interests, she said dryly, the words carrying just enough edge to make Patricia's smile falter. Madison, who had been silent throughout the exchange, suddenly spoke up. I made that video, she said quietly, her voice small and ashamed. I posted it to TikTok. I thought it was funny. The admission hung in the air like smoke. Lady Pemberton turned to study the teenager, her expression unreadable. And how do you feel about that now? She asked. Madison's eyes filled with tears. I feel horrible. I never thought... I didn't realize how cruel it was. I just saw someone different and I made fun of it. She looked at Jeremiah directly for the first time in months. I'm sorry. I'm really, really sorry. Jeremiah studied her face, saw genuine remorse there, and felt something ease in his chest. I appreciate that, he said simply. Lady Pemberton nodded approvingly. Growth and recognition of our mistakes. That's the beginning of wisdom. Perhaps you'd like to be part of our new outreach program as well, Miss Whitmore. Someone your age could help us understand how to reach young people more effectively. Madison's face brightened with surprised hope. Really? You'd let me help after what I did? Redemption is earned through action, not just apology, Lady Pemberton replied. But yes, I believe everyone deserves the chance to transform their mistakes into meaningful contribution. She turned back to Jeremiah, extending her hand for a proper handshake. So, Mr. Washington, what do you say? Ready to take arms against that sea of troubles? Jeremiah looked down at the envelope in his hands, then at the faces surrounding him. Lady Pemberton's encouraging smile, Madison's hopeful expression, the Whitmores' awkward recognition of their own blindness. For 3 years, he'd tended their gardens, invisible and undervalued. Now, suddenly, he was being offered the chance to tend his own growth, to cultivate the dreams he'd kept hidden like seeds in winter soil. Yes, he said, his voice steady and strong. Yes, I'm ready. Later that evening, after Lady Pemberton had departed and the Whitmores had retreated to process their shock privately, Jeremiah sat in his small apartment, the acceptance letter spread before him on his kitchen table. The reality was finally sinking in. In 2 months, he'd be on a plane to London, walking into the same institution that had trained some of the world's greatest actors. He opened his worn copy of Hamlet to the soliloquy that had started everything, the words that had made him a target and ultimately opened doors he'd never imagined possible. To be or not to be, he read aloud. But this time, the question felt different. Not about existence versus death, but about choosing courage over comfort, possibility over safety. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. The message was simple. From one admirer of the bard to another, break a leg in London. The stage awaits. CP. Lady Catherine Pemberton had given him her personal number. Jeremiah smiled, closed the book, and began planning for the greatest role of his life. Himself, fully realized and finally free to become everything he'd dreamed possible. The garden shed, the mockery, the viral humiliation, it had all led to this moment of transformation. Sometimes, he realized, the cruelest winters precede the most glorious springs. In September, he'd take that first flight of his life, crossing the Atlantic toward a future that had once seemed as unreachable as the stars. But tonight, in his small apartment in Atlanta, with Shakespeare's words echoing in his mind and possibility blooming in his heart, Jeremiah Washington was already flying.